All right, hopefully everybody is here to Scripture Falls. Is that what it is? Sculpture Falls, whichever the name is. Sculpture Falls, that's what it is. For Curiosity Unleashed. I say this differently every time. I don't know why. It's basically clickbait to get everybody here, but mastering the art of asking, listening, and innovating. So you guys are all here for that. My name is Sarah Beete. And just a little bit about me. I am the new head of business development for Neptune Digital. They are based in the United Kingdom. I live in the United Kingdom. I've been there, I think we were just talking with my family, it's been about 16, 17 years that I've lived over there. So I feel like I'm well-versed and ingrained in the culture and everything. We've got a cool little cottage. It was built in 1750, so it's old and it's quaint and it's charming, and that's basically what we do all of our free time with. A little bit more is actually myself and my team are awardees of 2 Claris Excellent in Design Awards. Very, very proud of that, back to back. And you can see the dates on that. That was over the COVID period. So it was, as everyone can imagine, was pretty crazy around that time. This is my second time speaking at a conference here. The first, obviously, was DevCon before. My first talk was about a very technical topic when cloud first came out on AWS. And now I get to talk about business topic, which is probably a lot more in my lane, but I really wanted to challenge myself to try to do that. So it's great to be back. It is nothing compared to, did anybody go to Chris Eppolite's AI session on Wednesday? 50 sessions he has under his belt. I'm just hoping I get welcomed back for a third. So it's pretty impressive and a milestone for him there. A little bit more. I just had a baby a year ago.
Congratulations.
Super exciting for me. It's fun. And I also have a 5-year-old dog, and between the two of them, they're fighting over who owns the dog bed. So right now, the baby is winning. And then I've got a 34-year-old husband. And as you can see, I'm surrounded by a bunch of guys, and they all take after him. So that's really lucky of me. But no, they're like the highlight of my life and super supportive and everything. And basically, I do this because they allow me to be able to do this. So that's fantastic. So today, Curiosity Unleashed, mastering the art of asking, listening, and innovating. I'm just double checking because I know there's no mics. Can everybody hear okay?
Yes.
You can always lift it up, but if this is okay, that's great. Okay? Awesome. All right, so today's session, we're going to cover a couple of different things. All right, we're going to talk about the power of how powerful questions are. We're going to talk about how growth is fueled by curiosity, right? And we're going to talk about how vulnerability is actually a strength. And then we're going to kind of wrap all of that up in that there is an art in listening. Okay, I've had a couple conversations before this session started, just even talking about that keyword of listening, so we're definitely going to talk about that. What I'm going to hope is that you walk away with some tools that you can put into your arsenal and that you can use in your day-to-day immediately. And that also you get a new appreciation for, I'm going to not use the word right questions, and you're going to see that in kind of little quotes later, but asking questions and how that unlocks true innovation, right, in the projects that you do with your clients. So hopefully, you've come to this session. That's what we're going to cover. That's what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to start a little bit with a tiny story, professional story that I've got. But back in 2020, it was the first days of the global pandemic and the impact of that being realized and experienced by everyone. Our team's curiosity actually went to go and ask what seemed like a really simple question, which was what can we do to help? And a lot of people have that question out there. And this led to more questions. This led to us going, well, hang on, who could use the support? What's needed most? Who really needs it most? Okay. And we took those questions and we asked the UK's largest ambulance service, which was in London. And they answered with the project that you're seeing up above. And basically they needed to manage their PPE and getting that deployed out to their frontline staff, which they did not have the capability of doing, managing that at a scalable level, which was alarming, okay, to say the least. So together we worked tirelessly night and day. I'm pretty sure it was almost 24-hour days. It was crazy. And with the help of Claris and with the help of the partner from the ambulance service, in 2 weeks we deployed to thousands of frontline supporters or frontline workers. Evergreen, they've never used the app before, but this app to be able to manage their PPE. And through that, we were unforeseen to us. It helped so many people. So we're super proud of that. It's one of the award-winning apps that I just kind of said before that was there. And it's still used by the National Health Services across England. today. And there's thousands of users that are using that, tens of thousands actually of users that are using that. And it's all started by asking the simple question of what can we do to help? And having partners like the London Ambulance Service, we were just able to help in just that way that we couldn't see it. And it is undoubtedly one of the most, proud moments that I think I've had in my professional career. It really was. And it really shows the power in just asking that simple question of what can I do to help? So it's super, super important that I'm gonna talk a lot and drink a lot. So we're gonna go into the first topic there, the power of asking questions, how to open the doors with the right question. I do that because to me, no question is a bad question, all right? And some people might disagree with that. That's okay, it's all subjective. But to me, if you're asking a question in the first place, that's what's important. We've got a slide here. It's going to be up for a while because I'm going to talk about a bunch of things. But basically, the slide is going to talk about, is kind of representing how different questions can lead to different answers, right? You can kind of all start at the same baseline. But as you kind of start having the conversation, have the different perspectives in the room, people can come up with different types of solutions, right? So what you're doing is you're kind of going down different paths. And these paths, you might not necessarily foresee where they're going to go. That's okay. That's absolutely okay. A lot of times we try to go into these conversations with a plan already and with a goal and with a boundary that we're already trying to have predefined. And that really is going to lock you in. We get into a habit of questioning, right? That can actually lead you to miss out on the things that you don't or didn't know to ask in the first place. That kind of resonate with people a little bit. I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads, which is great. So to me, in my opinion, the best thing that you can do is actually go out of your way and escape these kind of isolation bubbles that you didn't know you made. Okay, no blaming anybody on that. But you didn't know that you made. And what you can do is put yourself into different situations with different people, hearing a lot of different things. And you're going to hear the things that you wouldn't have heard before. And it's going to be the stuff that people wanted to say to you, but they didn't have the opportunity, they never actually said it to you. And you miss out on a whole bunch of knowledge. Okay? I promise you, if you just do that and put yourself into situations that you didn't know and ask different groups of questions, you're going to find out that there's just a whole new ideas and there's just a whole new landscape that you're going to be able to explore with them. Right? It's going to change. It's going to open up the doors that you just didn't know were there. But with that, even the wrong questions can be powerful questions, okay? Because they can rightly change the direction and the focus of the conversation, right? You ask something and they're like, no, that's not it. I was like, okay, I'm not going to go there. That's not going to happen, right? We've all been there. But that's really good, right? Because we need to be able to navigate these conversations with our clients. And it doesn't have to just be your clients. It could be with your team as well. We need to be able to find ways to do that. So there's to me, no wrong question, no bad question, silly, stupid question, or anything like that. But there might be a way to ask a more beautiful question, okay? And with that, there's a guy named, what's his name? Hang on. Warren Berger. He's got a book called A Book of Beautiful Questions, and he's actually done a couple different books on that. But he's got really great insight on how questions impact your personal and professional lives. And basically, it's a massive book of questions, and he's got a follow-up that's on it as well. But he talks about different types of questions. He talks about the whats and the whys and the why nots. He also talks about how types of questions. All of these are very, very important. And each of these and how they relate to different creative ideas. Okay? We're going to talk about a lot more of those in this presentation. What I'm going to talk about is just a little bit of an example of a type of way to kind of break the ice, break the change, and break the habit of how you're asking questions. So there's a brainstorming technique called question burst. And it's used by Hal Gregerson, and he's part of the MIT leadership group. And what they do, essentially what happens is that you got you and your colleagues, and you've got one person that kind of sets the challenge to the group, okay? And we're not going to do this because I'm not going to be able to write down what I have to do in the response. But you have one person that sets the challenge to the group. And then basically it's rapid fire questions where their colleagues are just straight up asking questions, right? And the goal is that they're supposed to write them all down as close as verbatim as possible without answering any of them, okay? And you might go, well, what's the point of that? What does that do? What you're trying to do is you're trying to end up with a better understanding of what the problem is, but you're also trying to change the connection between question and answer. Because when the normal kind of connection of question and answer is there's one question, there's one answer. What we're saying is, no, there isn't one answer. There isn't one question. And you get a fuller scope of what's kind of the problem would be. You get different perspectives that are coming in there, and you get a different attitude towards the problem, right? Kind of resonate with some people with that. But it's a really cool thing. You do have to type a lot. I think, if you do this virtually, you can do like a transcript and throw it into an AI tool, and then they can get all your bullet points for you, and that would be really great. But, do it however you like on that. Got a quote here with Albert Einstein. He said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the question or questions to ask and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. I think this kind of goes against what we do as developers sometimes. Sometimes we try to jump in there with what we already know and what we do best, and maybe we've got an example already, and then we miss what the client's actually saying. And that's really, really powerful. Take the time. Take the time to listen. Take the time to get the right people in the room. And, who better to say it than Albert Einstein, right? So I've got this slide here, and we're going to go through in a second just a couple examples of taking a question, I'm not going to say right or wrong or bad or anything, and how we can maybe elevate it a little bit. But what this kind of little cartoon kind of shows is like, questions, you can ask small questions, but you might just get small results from that. Or you can ask bigger, deeper questions. And then from that could lead to bigger discoveries. So just try to think about that. Try to think about, you're not just trying to fill time, you're trying to find some intrigue, you're trying to find some connection, you're trying to engage with your client, right? And then that way you're trying to find the information you don't know, but also your client might not know some of these things too. Your colleagues might not know some of these things. Cool, so we're gonna go into some examples, and I'm gonna do, I think about 4 or 5 of them, and we're gonna do a little bit before and after. These are all things I have said, or my team said. So these aren't things that have just been pulled off the web and we're going, hey, don't do this. So I just wanted you to know these are real examples of things. But these are going to be examples of taking general questions to making them a bit more powerful, okay? So the first one is, can you explain that product feature again? I'm sure pretty much everybody's probably asked this one, but can you explain it? It's not a bad question, right? But it is kind of showing that, I don't know what you said. And can you explain it again? And your client or your colleague might not really know what it is that you're trying to say, and they're just, trying to work it and go, well, I'll just repeat it again and maybe change some of the words and that sort of thing. And that's not really what you're trying to ask them for. What you're asking them for is, how would you explain that feature to somebody who's never seen your product before, right? Or never seen your process before? You're kind of asking them to bring it down a little bit, almost to like toddler size. No. Be busy soon, I'm sure. But almost a toddler size, where you're just breaking it down of like, explain to me, break it down. They just start dropping their acronyms. They stop assuming that you know how the process works exactly. They start going, oh, wait a minute, hang on, so-and-so does that too. That's not just in my remit. And you start breaking it down and seeing the full picture. Okay, so kind of changing that question, that perspective. You're asking a similar thing, but you're asking it to be a little bit more focused. Another one, what do you want? Just, what do you want? Like, that happens all the time, right? So it's a big question, right? That's, if somebody asks you that, what do you want? I mean, $1 million, probably more. A yacht. No, but you're trying to focus it, right? It's too big. It's too big of a question. What problem are we trying to solve? That's how I would change and elevate that question a little bit more. You take the you out, you take the want out, because sometimes what they want isn't what they need. And we're talking about, what is the problem that we together, because we're all in the room together, what are we trying to solve? It's a really powerful question, that one. All right, next one we've got is, how do you expect that feature to work? Again, that's a little bit more of a what do you want, because you're at this point of like, we've done it, and we still don't, or you're at the beginning of like, just tell me what you need and that sort of thing. What happens here is, one, you're in the room, so you're supposed to be helping them figure out what the feature is supposed to do. And at the same time, they're not the one that's there trying to make the solution, right? You're trying to bring the solution to the table. So another way to kind of ask that is, how do you do that today? Well, this is a lot different from the original question, right? It's like, how does that kind of relate? But what you're doing, instead of just talk about the features, like, walk me through these steps. Let me see what's happening. And then you're kind of sitting there and you're starting to grasp what are the opportunities. You can start jotting those down and making those notes. But what you're doing is, your client, or hopefully not your colleagues, but your client kind of only knows what they've seen before. So the technology, what their competitors have done, what they've seen on their iPhone, what they've seen on a website, right? They only know that. They don't know the things that you might be able to unlock with them, for them. They might be just being introduced to Claire's platform. They have no idea what this can do. I mean, I had my brother, he's just started doing his training, and he came out of one of the training courses on Monday. He just was like this. And I was like, I never knew I could do that. And like your clients are going to be the exact same way with that. Okay? That's powerful, that. The last one that I've got there is, do you like your current system? I started and I asked this question, like this is actually one of mine. This does absolutely nothing for you whatsoever. You're going to get somebody who's probably saying, oh, it's annoying, or it doesn't work, or it's all paper-based, which is great because we know if it's paper-based, we can come and help. But you get a lot of people, they have a lot of emotion around it, but you don't get any context. You don't get any follow-on that you can kind of go there. You almost have to start your next question by starting again. Does that kind of sound like a conversation that you might have had with a client? Yeah. So another way that you can do it that makes it just opens it up a lot more is, what about the existing process? And you can ask this 3 times. Process, product, or feature is the most frustrating. And you may go, Sarah, you still got an emotion there. Frustrating is an emotion, right? What I'm using frustrating for is to identify pain points. Okay, and again, you can go to process, product, feature. You can ask that 3 times, and you can ask it over and over again, depending on what module you're talking about or what area of the business or something like that. But what about that feature, existing feature, is most frustrating? And that's where you're seeing your opportunity to gather them all together. Okay? So what we're trying to do is stay away from the leading questions, stay away from the questions that are limiting you and boxing you in, stay away from the ones that show assumption. If it's too biased or too complex, if it's too big, you're already going to have to break that down. So just try to think about how you're coming about the questions with your clients. Cool. So that brings us into curiosity, right? Talk about questions going to curiosity. Curiosity fuels growth. They have the why, the how, or the what if. So I kind of think of curiosity as like the itch, and questions is how you scratch the itch. Does that kind of get it? Yeah. So the more questions you ask, it works that way, I think. And with this, I've got a little graph there. I'm hoping people can see it. I know you can see the slides afterwards, but it's basically a timeline of different inventions. And is it like all of the inventions of the world? But there's a few important ones that are there. But all of these inventions or these innovations came from questions. All right, people ask simple questions. And maybe you'll guess some of these, but one of them is one of the questions, and I'm paraphrasing it slightly, but how do I keep my food lasting longer without human intervention? Okay, refrigerator. And people were putting things in ice underground, having to bring ice over, snow, all that kind of stuff. But how do we do it without intervention? And that actual question led to the development of the refrigerator, but then also completely redefined the brewery and meat packing industries, because now we can transport things across the country, even further across the world, all around the world. Quite a powerful question of, I just don't want to do it myself, basically. All right, the next one is, I won't let you guess this one because it'll be too obvious, but the World Wide Web. Kind of a small one, it didn't really do a whole lot, but still. But the question was, you had a whole bunch of professors in the university that had information that they wanted to share. How do we share this across the other universities and improve our information sharing? Lo and behold, that happened. What was that? The year that is 1989. Can you believe that wasn't that long ago? Then we go to something even simpler. Let's bring it down a little bit. I'll start with the question with this one again. And it was, at night, okay, in an emergency, how can I see faster? Okay, it's a bit of a weird question, but how do I see faster? And somebody goes, oh, I could take some pine sticks and I can put some sulfur on it and I can put it in a box and we can transfer it over and then we have matches and we no longer have to use a rock and a flint. Simple, tiny little thing, but then all of a sudden, like, people were safer, you could get the light, you could get your oil lamp on more, and then obviously we expanded it to using different kinds of technologies after that. But a really basic little thing led to a really, really simple kind of invention, but it was innovative for the time. Okay, so just trying to impress upon you, like, no question is too small, and over time, as we've learned more things, it's grown. So again, no question is too small. No questioner is too small. So we've got the inventor of the Polaroid camera, his 3-year-old daughter, when they took a picture and she had to wait for it, and she went, Daddy, why do I have to wait so long? Or why can't I see the picture now? And the dad went, yeah, that's kind of right. And then figured out how to make the Polaroid camera. And so the pictures of the actual picture is really difficult to see, otherwise I would have used that, but that's actually them. But what's really interesting is that 3-year-old, and I'm going to kind of talk about the 4-year-old inquisitive wanderer. It's a type of questioning that is really, really common. In fact, we're in Apple, so we'll talk about Steve Jobs, but he was known to be the inquisitive wanderer. And he would go around and he would just ask his team, his design teams, his UX, his engineering teams, why? Why, right? And it got his team to start thinking about questions in that similar type of way. And I would say they're pretty innovative and creative. You know, they changed a lot of things. So, but the thing is, why is this style of questioning so effective? Okay. And the thing is that children thrive on curiosity. Tiny bit of water. Hang on one sec. People grow up asking questions, but many children ask why, like almost excessively. And again, I know mine's 1-year-old and he's going to be 5 soon, and I'm going to just hear why all the time. And I'm going to basically call my grandparents and ask them to, or his grandparents, and ask them to answer all those questions. But they're wanting explanations. They're interested about everything. They're not afraid. They're curious. They're fearless. But why is that? Why are they so fearless about that? It's rhetorical. I'm not going to pick on people, I promise. But it's because they're in a phase of learning where they're absorbing information, right? And basically they have this wide capacity and they are just taking it in at a rapid pace. That's really cool. Okay? But studies have found that curiosity peaks at about 4 or 5 and it steadily declines from there. And as people grow up, okay, this part always like really gets me though, they become really self-conscious about asking questions and really fearful. And there's an increase, they're increasingly inclined, okay, this is important, to display confidence and expertise over curiosity and creativity. I'm going to say that again. People are more inclined to display confidence and expertise over curiosity and creativity and exquisitiveness. Oh, I can't say that one. Inquisitiveness, that's the one. But I find that's something that really, really stuck with me. And probably resonated as well. So I'm going to ask a tiny bit of audience participation. Nobody's coming up here. I'm not going to do question bursts at you or anything like that and then make you figure out what happened. But just by what happened to you, that'd be shocking. By a show of hands, how many of you have refrained from asking a question for fear of being wrong or ill-prepared? I would imagine pretty much everybody is there. And just keep your hands up if you don't mind. Can everybody just look around a little bit? All right, just to take stock of that and listen for that later, okay? So there's a reason for it. We're going to talk about that vulnerability because that's the main thing. To ask is to kind of admit that we don't know something, right? And we just talked about how expertise is seen as more of a quality that we're willing to display. And we do that because we don't want to look wrong.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Do you mind saying that quote one more time? The expertise over curiosity.
Yeah, the expertise over curiosity. Yeah, I'll get it verbatim for you. Ready? Okay. People are increasingly inclined to display confidence and expertise over curiosity and inquisitiveness. I threw in creativity on top of that when I talk about it.
Thank you.
Work for you? Cool. Awesome. All right, so we've got a really great quote. This is a renowned author. I think she's got 6 best-selling on the New York list and things. Brene Brown. Vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. And I think that's really, really important, and I can't agree with her more. It takes a lot of courage to ask questions because you're admitting you don't know something. So you're admitting that you're a bit ignorant of the topic, of the area, and that sort of thing, right? And I find if you put yourself in these situations, like I've been saying, like, oh, get outside of your bubble, do that, you're going to find yourself more and more in the probability that you're going to be in positions where you are uncomfortable and you don't know what's going on. And that's really difficult. And how do you is there a power in embracing that? Is it like, is that vulnerability and the knowledge in the pursuit of knowledge important? Absolutely. Okay, so what I don't want you to do is think, oh, well, I know what I need to know and I can get by with that. Actually, as you can see with the timeline that we had before, we need to keep evolving because the changes are going to keep coming. So vulnerability, I've been this person. So I feel like I should have just superimposed my face on that one. But fear is the #1 enemy of questioning, right? And there's a lot of reasons that we have fear. And I think it's important to understand that because one, then you can connect with it. And then two, we're going to give some ways to kind of overcome that, some tools to use. But basically, I'm going to do this way so I can read it that way. But it reveals you don't know something that you should, okay? And that makes us uncomfortable because you're in the room, so you should be an expert, right? And if you're there and you don't know the answer to the question and things like that, well, really, you're there to ask the questions in the first place. You shouldn't know everything because then you wouldn't need the meeting, right? And that internal or external for that. The questions could be too obvious. Everybody knows it. Everybody seems in the game. Everybody seems to know what they're talking about. And I'm going to ask this question that's going to make me really stand out. That's uncomfortable. It makes me feel vulnerable. Being wrong. That was the raise the hand before, but that's also, that's really scary to be wrong. But why is that scary to be wrong? Because you might be off topic. It might seem uncool. I'm going to go on the uncool one a little bit because this really works. You know, when we said about 4 or 5 years old and then it kind of a steady decline, there's a lot of studies that show like when kids are going to school because, you know, they want to kind of be a part of the group or they want to have human connections and things like that. They refrain from asking questions because they feel uncool or they don't want to stand out for those reasons. And so it starts at a really young age that we start getting that kind of idea of like, oh, I can't do this or I'm limited here or I'll go research it offline or hey, Google's there now, so that helps me. But it really starts at a young age for that. Are you competent in the role that you're in? So it kind of goes like, if I keep showing that I don't know something and it seems a little bit obvious, is somebody going to question why I'm even here in the first place? I could be annoying, embarrassed, or I ask a question that's a bit low, sorry about that. But I can ask the question and there's complete silence that happens in the room. And that's also very scary. Okay, I think we've all had that where you said something and it's almost like mic drop, but not in the good way. It's more like, you know, yeah, that sort of thing. So how can we find strength? Okay. I don't know if anybody knows, but there was Lego on the timeline before, so I've used Lego again. But my biggest one that I pulled up is don't be afraid to ask the questions in the first place. Okay. The first one after that is being a leader does not mean you need to know everything. There was a definite time where if you were a leader, you needed to be the expert in everything, and you had to lead by example. There is a massive trend. We talked about Steve Jobs being one of those people. There's lots more that are successful in it. I think Pepsi's another one, where asking questions and being that person that breaks that boundary first is actually opening up your team to grow. You get more engagement, you get trust, and you just breed a ground of creativity because everybody is free to think. Okay, there's there's lots of studies, you can look it up online, but there's definitely a trend of change in the style of management that you have. It also takes a lot of courage to admit what you don't know. If you start demonstrating that, more people will see that and they'll actually see this as something to participate in versus something that differentiates everyone from each other. Okay. What do we have there? Embrace what you don't know and understand. So one, it takes courage to do it, but also to like own it as well. That's very good to do. And go outside that bubble. So if the more you go outside that bubble, the more you're going to kind of start building a bit of a muscle memory in the types of questions that you're going to ask because you're constantly bringing in the new. That will strengthen you. So practice in it is absolutely fantastic. But we all had, literally every single person had their hand up. You aren't alone. Everybody has felt that vulnerable feeling. Sometimes we forget that. I'm standing up here and I'm like, does everybody else be nervous that they were talking in front of 30 people? Yeah, probably. But then you forget it. And then just it kind of humanizes it a bit and breaks down that barrier that you have. Right? There's a couple other different kinds of tools, things that I can suggest that you could do to try to help you prepare and just I don't know, kind of become a little bit stronger in this area. Practicing is one. So, you know, doing a speech 5 times in a row, that also helps things. But no, practicing is really good. It sounds really basic, but using like a cue card, or even if you have like notes or any kind of app that you have on your phone or iPad or whatever, or I'm saying Apple products, but not on purpose. But any of those that you can do just to have prompts of things that maybe they're different style of questions. You don't exactly know where the conversation might go, but they might help if there's like a little bit of a lull in the moment. It's important that cue card continues to be updated because again, the questions will evolve. We'll talk about that in a little bit. It's also really good. Use your team. You have a team. Like I said, you don't have to be an expert in everything. Use your team to prep beforehand. Have a little bit of a round robin. Do a question burst fire round. We do a thing called rubber ducking when we're just trying to see some of the obvious things. And sometimes the team doesn't even have to say anything, but just the fact that there's other people in the room, you kind of go, oh, that was a really good one, and you start adding it up. But also your team together, even if they're not going to that discovery session with your client or refinement meeting or anything like that, they bring value, right? And also your team is there to kind of make a cohesive team. So there's going to be gaps in everyone's knowledge, everyone's skill base. So bring it all together and be stronger together. It's really important that. The other thing I would recommend, and I do this about speaking as well, be the first person in the room to admit that you don't know something. In whatever way you find, whatever voice that you can find on there. But I promise you, the moment you do that, you have an instant friend in the room, okay? Instant connection with your client. It's very, very important. Checking my time, making sure I'm all right. Okay, so with that, we're going to kind of move on then to the art of listening. Asking is just half of the equation. Gentlemen in the back, we were talking about this before. It's very, very important to, while you've got these great questions and you've prepped everything and you've put yourself in this vulnerable state and you've got your team all there and everybody's at the same level and you're just ready to go, you've got the meeting. If you're not there to listen, it's not going to matter. Asking a question is only valuable if you listen with an open mind. And I'm going to be super blunt with this. As soon as you ask that question, you need to shut up and listen. That is literally what needs to happen. It's very blunt that, but you really need to do that. How do you do this? There's a bunch of ways to be a great listener. I'm going to show a couple of those, and we're going to talk a little bit about active and passive listeners. I'm going to give a lot of examples with that and things, and hopefully that maybe some of them will resonate. I've been some of these and then tried to work on skills, but it's definitely something that over time you kind of hone. So active listening. I like to start with the do's because I think, hey, let's have that be on the screen longer and people focus on that a lot longer versus starting with the don'ts. So how do you become a better listener? All right. Eye contact. It seems really obvious, but how many of you have been in a meeting where you go and the client's on one side of the desk and then you've got you and maybe one or two of your colleagues and you all sit down, you put your computer, you lift it up and then you start typing down. And your client's kind of sitting there going, oh, I need a computer too, so I can start typing and looking down. And all of a sudden, instantly, you've kind of changed the dynamic of where this conversation is going to go. So eye contact. Ask why questions. If you don't know what kind of questions to ask, do a whole bunch of whys. Okay, even just starting there. Why about everything? Okay. Next one after that is listen for ideas and opportunities. Don't say them out loud. Listen to them. Jot them down, make notes or whatever. Right now, you are listening. Okay. You by all means can do the little notes, try not to write a whole paragraph about it, but if you need your little idea burst or something like that, even more so, you could jot them on Post-it notes with your client, have them there so that they're building them with you and they can see what you're starting to understand. Okay? Confirm understanding with paraphrasing. I paraphrase a lot. But it really shows, one, is there a knowledge gap? Is there something that I misunderstood? Allows for the conversation to extend with everything as well. But it's a great way to participate in the conversation as well. Ignore distractions. Seems really obvious, but you've got your computer, you've got your wearable technology, you've got your phone, you've got your emails coming in, you've got your team Slack messages that are coming through, you've got that email that you could just write yes to, you've got, all these different things that could be happening. Maybe the dog walkers come and you're like, okay, I'll pay you later. Like, trying to get all your stuff, your to-dos done. They're incredibly distracting. Every time you look down at your watch, every time you look at your phone, every time there's a ding, you don't have your do not disturb on when you're in a meeting. Every time there's one of those. This is for in-person meetings and when you have virtual meetings, okay? The amount of virtual meetings, because we've got multiple screens up where you're doing other things and you think your eye contact's there or your focus is there, it is not, I guarantee you, and everyone in the room is noticing it. We've just got a little bit used to it, a little tolerant of it. But if you think about it, how many times have you gone through and you go, I got about 50% of what everybody said? It's really important to be aware of that. The next one is allow enough time. We think there's a lot of opinion out there that speed is the most important thing. So we can go in, have an hour meeting, get everything we want. It looks efficient, it looks effective, it's cheaper, all of this kind of stuff. If you don't allow enough time to have the conversation, and I'm not saying do a full day, but I'm saying, if you're talking about a system rebuild or something, you're probably going to have to chunk that out a little bit. But, have that initial conversation, especially so that you can make that relationship. Because once you have the relationship and once you have the trust and once they see, I'm here for you, you are going to have a reoccurring customer. You're going to have a relationship. You're going to have just so much more that's coming out of the conversation. Ask the awe questions. This is awe stands for and what else. So you've asked the whys and all of this. Well, then you can move on to the, and what else? What else do I not know? What else have we not spoken about? What are we missing here? And that's a really nice mop-up one, but it's also a nice continuation type of technique to use as well. And then listen with your whole body. I had to get one of these because I talk like this. But there's a lot of ways to kind of promote good body language. But again, if you sit there and you're just in front of your screen and you're doing that, it does kind of close the conversation pretty quickly. So just try to be aware of that. And again, all of these, again, you don't have to do them all at once, but you can grow in these areas and it brings a lot of confidence. But the more that your conversation with your clients, with your colleagues, is more like a conversation, the more that you're going to see the engagement and that creative atmosphere starts bubbling, right? And then people are starting to engage at that level where you start breeding the curiosity that's coming through as well. That's linked to the ideas or the innovation that you're hoping for. So we'll do the don'ts, and they're going to be short. Well, there's as many, but we'll be shorter with them, okay? So with the don'ts, don't interrupt, okay? No matter how much you're like, okay, we need to move it on, don't interrupt. It will get you nowhere. I have actually been in a meeting where the second one happened and it was awkward. Don't make judgments or argue with your clients, or really try not to do it with your colleagues. That's super important. Multitasking during the conversation, so that's kind of the opposite of the one that we were saying before. Like, even though you've got a to-do list and you may be crammed in a meeting, maybe you shouldn't cram in that meeting. Think about your time a bit more. Showing signs of impatientness. So that's like the tapping and the clicking of the pen, ruffling of papers, packing up your stuff. Packing up your stuff while the client's still talking, that's a little awkward. Don't do it, okay? Going in there with preconceived ideas or expectations, as we've spoken before, that's really not what you're there for. Again, if you were there, you probably shouldn't be having the meeting in the first place. The closed body language, massive thing. There's a lot of studies about that. Listening with bias or hubris. You go in there acting like you know it all, acting like you've got the answer for the client and you haven't even listened to them, you're not going to make a connection with that client. In fact, I'd be surprised if you continue to have that client for very long. They will see that quite fast. They'll read through that quite quickly. And the last one is finishing someone's sentences, right? This is not like speed dating where you're like, oh my gosh, we connect. This is amazing. It's not that, okay? This is when you start finishing someone's sentences, you are starting to imply that maybe they're not getting to the point fast enough. Maybe you, again, have the answer for them. You kind of become a little bit condescending as well because you're like, oh, come on, oh, yes, oh, and that thing. And it just doesn't work in your favor. Give them time, right? They're the client or your colleague. This works for both that, or your partner. You know, like give the person the time to finish the conversation and the thought that they had. All right, so we've got that. Obviously, the do's are the active listeners. Yes.
Or don't interrupt.
Yes.
What if, like, conceptually you're realizing you're not tracking anymore? Like, I understand there's probably just general guidelines, right? But
yeah,
to be an active listener, it feels like sometimes you might need to hop in with a question to get back into a space where you understand what the client's saying.
Well, you could kind of use that in a way of like when you're trying to paraphrase it a little bit and just try to check in, are we still on topic? You can kind of do a little bit of that and then let them kind of continue and then come back to it, be like, oh, let's make a point to just, you use the phrase circle back. You can kind of do it that way. Yes, is there times with that and you kind of have a facilitator, somebody's taking on that facilitator role a little bit. So yes, there will be a bit, but try to allow them to finish the thought first before you do that. You can absolutely go and change the tone of how the course of the conversation. You can absolutely do that, but just make sure you let them finish. Yeah,
is there a difference between an interrupt and a redirect?
An interrupt, if your person has to stop speaking and you speak over them, that's the difference.
Interrupt. But I guess what I'm asking, like, there's such a technique as an interrupt, trying to turn an interrupt into a redirect to get more focused.
With an apology, probably.
You know, I know as a parent,
yeah.
One of my parenting techniques was on it too, was to how do I redirect my daughter
Yes.
to go in the right direction.
Yeah. No, and it is challenging. It definitely is challenging. Like I said, like you will have more times than not somebody that kind of naturally, or you've already identified it, who's kind of facilitating it. And that's why using like post-it notes and things on the board are really helpful, because you can kind of go, all right, this one, that sounds really great. This is going to come over here. You still acknowledge that that's an important piece that you're going to get to, and then you can kind of bring it back over here. So you're not ignoring the conversation that just kind of went, because the tangents are good sometimes. Again, if you don't ask, you don't know where the conversation is going to go. Put it there as a visual. And you can do that virtually as well, because you can do share screens. I think there's mural boards and things like that that you can use, lots of different tools. But use that as, that's great. Let's keep that there, but let's finish this part and we're going to come right back. That's kind of a nice way to do that. There's lots of other ones, but we can get into those. So the do's are active listeners, the don'ts are passive listeners. And one of the key things that you can identify, you can start identifying in your teams or even between your clients and everybody else, is that the passive listeners are the ones that basically lack follow-up conversation, actions, questions. Yeah, they just bringing them to the table. And then you'll see the active listeners are the ones that are asking clarifying questions, right? They're participating and they're engaging. Okay, and again, it's a skill to have. You can go too far the other way, and you can, and then try to rebalance it and things like that. So it is something to practice, absolutely. Just checking the time. I think I'm all right. We're going to get close. All right, so then we've got the evolution through inquiry. Okay, queries are going to change over time. We've kind of hinted at this before. I just kind of wanted to show this little graphic here. It's super basic, but it brings me back a little bit. But this question started with, even before 1980, is how do we communicate over long distances more effectively? Okay, and that kind of started with like the invention of the telegraph and the telephone and things like that. And then we're like, oh, fax machine. I still see fax machines now. It's really crazy. I'm sure a lot of people do. But you can see, like, we went to pagers, PDAs. I think I had one of those ones with the pen. I can't remember. Palm Pilot, was that? Oh man, that was so cool. Mobile phones, the smartphones, which basically runs my life at this point. We've got the video conferencing that happens. We've got wearable technology. So what I'm saying now is we got to 2018, but then we had to evolve more because we needed it to be more transferable and more available to us all the time. This is a major distraction, by the way, so totally turn those off when you're in a meeting. But it's just really important to see that like all of these are answering the same question, but as the technology changed, our awareness changed, times changed, it's important to see that actually the inventions change and the innovative ideas keep coming. Cool. I think I carried all of those ones there. Awesome. So, what's I got on here? We have learned about the power of asking questions. We've gained some tools about how to fight that number one cause of fear. We've also gone and listened to that, the questions are half of the equation here. And the other half is like the main key is feeling that curiosity, and it's important to fuel that by giving it space, okay? And you're going to give it space by listening to the answers, right? We finally wrapped up with understanding that questions are going to be ever changing and ever evolving, which is great because it won't be boring. So that's awesome. And what I love is, has anybody seen Ted Lasso? Like, is that something that's familiar over here? Okay, just remember, I'll try to like remind, so it'll be appropriate, I promise. But there's the dart scene. Okay, and I'll set it up just a little bit, but the dart scene is like, it's a bit of a competition that's kind of happening there, and there's a specific amount of points that Ted's supposed to be able to get, and they're all thinking that he can't do it, and he kind of sits up there, and they're like, do you even know how to play darts or whatever? And I just love what he says with it, and he starts with, if they were curious, they would have asked more questions. And then he goes on to say, because then they would have found out that every single Sunday, I went with my dad and we played darts for hours. And then he just goes on with this whole entire thing. But the thing is, if they were curious, they would have asked more questions. And that's the thing. If you want to know, you ask. Okay? If you don't. And I think that's a really, really powerful thing to think about. Started with Albert Einstein, ends with Albert Einstein. The important thing is to not stop questioning. Super important. When in doubt, ask it out. Made that up on the fly there, so that works. Put it on a t-shirt, maybe. But basically, if you've got more questions, you want to continue the conversation, you can connect with me here. This is all my contact details. Basically, we can become best friends. I know I'm 6 hours, 7 hours difference from here. I don't know. Figure it out. Doesn't really matter. But I also really want to recommend some awesome sessions. So some of them are happening right now. Some of them have already happened. So go and look at the recordings afterwards because we're all going to have access really soon. But we've got Valentin Fulmer, he's got user stories. So these are all kind of building blocks, questions to user stories. We've got Vanessa Constanzo, she's actually doing her session right now. She's got a whole session about problem solving. Jordan Watson had a whole conversation about MVP, the minimal viable product. These are all great building blocks to get before you start developing, right? There's a whole kind of, a lot of us are doing consulting and things like that, but understanding in your team, it's really important for your team to know how to do these types of things, but they're really, really great resources. But I'm going to be here, obviously, until the rest of the conference and stuff, but if you've got more questions, please reach out. I'm more than happy to talk about it.
What was the book you mentioned earlier about question asking?
It was a book of beautiful questions. Yeah, it'll be on my slides. I'll make sure to put a reference note about that as well. Warren Berger, that's the name there. So I just I did exactly on time. Wow. All right, People have been asking as they go, but we do have time for Q&A if anybody has a question.
Do you have a favorite question you'd like to ask?
Do I have a favorite question? You know what, that second one that I had there, the elevating one, what problem are we trying to solve? That's a really good redirect question as well. When you're trying to focus on one, I love that one. It really starts and sets the tone of what the conversation's going to be. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Just a follow on that, like when you had it on the screen is really great because that's what we ask as a developer.
Yeah.
That's the whole reason you're in the room is to solve their problem. So, and it's also a great one to come back to because you'll inevitably go somewhere else and you start talking about what color the buttons should be well ahead of the time. And
Exactly.
then they'll have ideas for how they think it should work. And you're just trying to get to the meat of it, right? And so we'll always just be like, all right, well, back up.
Mm-hmm.
What problem are we trying to solve, right? And then it has to it's a way to frame what you're building,
Yeah,
really,
and a
right?
lot of times too, even if when you're trying to, we get so used to doing on-the-spot development as well, so you have your computers there and something's not working quite right, or oh, I could fix that real quick. And you start opening up your machine and you get in there and then all of a sudden they're seeing code, you've lost your client. They have no idea. And then they're just sitting there. And then you're kind of going, well, if you did that fast, why am I waiting 2 weeks for the other thing, right? It doesn't work. It doesn't work for you. So yeah, if you can just step that back, that's really great. Yes.
It's slightly an adjacent type question, but
No bad question. No bad question.
and not necessarily if we're looking for a client, but in different realms. So there's times where the client or the person veers off into very uncomfortable territory,
Okay.
whether in developing solutions I've had experience where they're trashing their prior developer or something like that, and you don't want to be part of that conversation. Or in the modern era, unfortunately, they may reveal something about their belief system or something that is offensive or thing, and you feel the need to stop that conversation at times. Do you have any techniques for possibly interrupting it when it has reached a place that doesn't need to be spoken in a group room?
Yeah,
But
mean,
doing
there's
it in a
some
graceful way, I
exceptions.
guess.
Yeah, no, I hear you. There's some exceptions, and obviously everybody's got to kind of find where they want to be in that. I hope everybody heard that question. Smaller for that. Again, some of those suggestions that are there of what's the problem we're trying to solve is another thing. Again, if you can get the stuff as visual as much as you can, sometimes you just have to move on from it. Sometimes you literally do just have to completely redirect it and not even give it any time, not even express that you're redirecting it. You just get back to the point. It might be a conversation that you have internally of, are we going to continue the relationship because of that? That all depends on how that escalates. But, at the end of the day, I would just not give it any room.
I mean, there's sometimes you just tell people stop.
You do. And you might have to.
But,
Those are exceptions
sometimes
to
you just-
things, right? So yeah, that's what I would do at that point. I don't know if that's super helpful, but that's probably what I would do.
Well, along these same lines, there's a phrase called having an already listening.
Okay. Yes.
That people have a story and you're running a story in your head. Oh, this client is just like this other client, or it's going to turn out just the same way, or this is a big red flag. So you have to be observant in that inquiry state of just being mindful of watching your own story.
Absolutely.
To clear out some space, to make this room maybe this is going to be different, or what's different about this that's not going to be repeat the same story.
Yeah.
And then when you're listening, the person has their story of, there's another developer, I've been down this road before, it's always turned out this way. So you have to penetrate their story to open up a new possibility.
Yeah.
I think we've taken the same training on stories. I I think I've sat through that session.
Yeah, no, and I hear that
I
definitely.
was piggybacking.
I think there's a couple things I would like to say on that is that starts to me from leadership. So leadership within your company, if you're starting to breed a certain way of thinking, and a certain way of kind of collaborating together, you know, when you're saying when you're prepping for a meeting and you're asking the questions and you're going in with those why questions, you start that from the beginning internally before you even get into the meeting. So then what you're doing is you're, again, creating that muscle memory, you're changing the tone, you're changing the attitude towards the problem, right? And sometimes the problem is the client. Sometimes that happens, okay? But I hope, oh, this is recorded, man. No, but sometimes that happens, right? But you got it, again, you can get over that. There's not a lot of problems that you can't get over. Again, there's exceptions, but there's not a lot of problems that you can't get over. But it's all about, I really think that stems from leadership that's on there. But again, when you ask, that could have started by asking a question that was too big, right? And so then that's when you start getting all of that opinion about why you hate the system. Oh, because X and Y did this, and then we were left in the lurch on this side, and that sort of, and you get this whole history that you didn't really need. It's a lot of noise that you didn't need. It's not going to help you with anything. So try to really phrase that question a bit more specific before you get into it. If you can work on that, you might find that there's less room for that other kind of commentary that's coming through. Yes.
I want to build over what he's saying because we have also our home always already listening. Like we have the question,
Yeah.
but then they start talking and we're not listening to what they're saying because we are already conceptualizing, structuralizing. Oh, I have an idea. We could do this, could do that. Oh, is it true? Is it false? And we're talking to ourselves and stop listening for what they're saying.
So there's a couple things that can kind of help with that too, just as some tools. So if it's a virtual meeting, oh my goodness, use that transcription tool and use that AI one. It is so great because one, you're not trying to jot it down. You know you have it. You're already trying to think about it because you're trying to some way try to remember a train of thought and lock that in a little bit. So that's part of the reason why that might happen. If you're doing that, if you're doing a face-to-face meeting, try to have somebody a little bit nominated for that as well. Again, I can't say post-it notes enough or whiteboards or that sort of thing and take pictures of it afterwards. It's a little bit more work afterwards, but you actually find that it's all ingrained at a different level because it's visual, because it's there as well, and that might help. Like I said, if you can just, once you start thinking about it and you get that train, you're itching to get into your machine and open it up, right? You're itching to get there. And so that's a slippery slope if you start going that way too. Yeah.
This might be a little presumptuous, but there's a little tool that I've practiced. It's exactly what you said with the note card.
Yep.
But to avoid some of this stuff where you're in your own head and you're paying attention to what they're saying, I write down at the end of this, that person has to look at me and said, "You understood me completely."
That's cool.
And that's my entire focus for the entire conversation, which takes me completely out of it.
That's such a
It's
great
another
way.
term called tactical empathy that's similar to that, but that's how, and I don't, I'm just offering it to the group. I don't do it perfectly every time, but when I do it, it works for me.
That's amazing. Oh, I like that a lot. Still.
Could you pop back to that slide where it had like the small question and then the big question?
And a few slides. Okay, that one. Yeah.
No, it's actually a cartoon,
Oh, that one.
that one. Do you know what that slide says to me?
What does it say?
Little questions become the lever to bigger questions. You kind of do, because if you, sometimes I find if you ask the little question, that then gives you you see, because the bigger rock, he's not moving by itself. He has a lever. That little rock is the small
Stepping-
question.
it's almost like a
There's
stepping
no
stone.
small question.
Yeah. I like that. That's good.
I'll back that up with a small story. I love the question of why. And I always ask it in either
Why's that?
3 or 5 times. And back in the 90s, I got called out of the IT department. I'm an in-house FileMaker developer. And there's an SAP deployment going on at our company. It's monstrous. And they just want somebody who could translate geek to the person they were writing a report for. So first I goes, what's the report? That is the why. And she shows me the report and what do you do with this report? And she says, I don't know, it's in my job duties. Why do you have these job duties? Let's see those. Okay, on the first of every month you run this report. Why? Well, I have to put it on the CFO's desk on the first day of each month. So I go to CFO, why do you need this report? What do these numbers mean? He goes, I have no idea. Since the first day I started 6 months ago, this report has shown up every month and I just throw it away. And it was able to just eliminate that entire task because nobody asked why they were doing it.
Yeah, there's like that 5 whys technique. You might have done 6, but that's so close. Yeah, absolutely. But it's funny that you find out that there's just something that is really good for. It's obsolete.
I have a question for you. How do you personally coach your team or you when things do take a route where your emotions might hijack your ability to stay focused on the other person?
We take a break.
Do you?
We 100% take a break. We don't have long meetings. That's definitely one of them. We work I work a lot personally on empathy. And trying to understand that from especially when people are uncomfortable. A lot of times it takes that tone because you've hit a nerve or you've hit a trigger, and sometimes that's because people are defensive because of the fear stuff. Identifying that quite quick is good, and it's especially if you're the one facilitating it. If you can read that in the room, there's no reason you can't just take a 5 minutes. Or if you need to bring it back, you can make an excuse to come back to the meeting, sort of thing. And from that, you can reset the agenda points as well. Maybe focus them somewhere else, or have an offline conversation. So I think there's no reason for that. If it's something that can't take a break, right? Okay, then it's going to take just a little bit more strength to facilitate that through. Okay, and you're going to really have to focus. Maybe you're not doing so many leading questions because you want to kind of stay away from that, but they might be very particular questions just to kind of get it across the mark. Then all the kind of temperature goes down, and then you can open it back up. So you might have to do a little bit of that as well.
Sounds like parenting.
Yeah.
Again, I've got a long way. I'm going to be busy. It's going to be crazy.
We're practicing. I've been practicing a little technique, just saying it.
Yeah.
So sounds like right now you're upset about, and it just sort of deflates the room.
It does when you call it out.
Though I like the idea, just take a break.
Yeah. Take 5 minutes. Get a cup of tea, cup of coffee. That's where you're at. Yeah. But yeah, no, I do think there is power in calling it out. Like, oh, so this is because frustration in some way or another. And sometimes you might find it's actually to a process that you need to fix internally. So you're fixing 2 things at the same time. Give it time. Give it time to do that. If you rush it because you're in this constraint, you're not going to get the solution you want. You're not going to get the team building that you're looking for. You just need to give it the time that it needs, and the respect that your team and your client needs as well.
The technique that I've found that's really helpful for that is like if they're way up here and then you meet the energy level and you're like, wow, it sounds like you're really upset right now. And they're like, yeah, I am. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm hearing you're really upset. I'm like, yeah, I am. Wow, I'm really sorry you're feeling upset. And you lower the energy each time and then they drop with you.
I think they call that mirroring.
There's a great, we had a consultant come in on a grant. It actually relates to what I was joking about with him, the story, the crucial conversations and the crucial accountability. We had a consultant come in and work with our people, the story versus fact, and how to get through hard, crucial conversations. It's a great tool that if anybody's looking for skills, they have a whole program and videos on it's all crucial accountability and crucial conversations. It's a very useful tools in navigating conversations and getting to the point you're trying to with de-escalation.
Yeah. That sounds like a good topic for next year. Yeah. Right? I think people might go to that, and then AI in front of it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Something else that's helped us there, take ownership where you can and remind everyone you're on the same side. That like diffuses, it's like, if they're upset with you, own it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And we're
messed
seeing,
up.
seeing some similar things here of like, there are people, you're going to find a friend in the room, right? You've got somebody else that's going through a similar thing with you. Call it out, be that person. And then all of a sudden it just starts breaking the ice, right? It cools it down.
Totally.
Yes. Thank you guys. I'm going to be here. Obviously you guys are going to be here, but if any